today is Daf Kuf Bet 102 in Metzia Bava Metzia. And we're up to the Mishnah on the bottom of Kuf Aleph Amud Bet. Continuing our discussion, which we have one more day of after today, and to the end of the parak, of renters. So says the Mishnah, Maskir Bayit L'Chavero. A person rents a house. So he goes, he sees the property, he says, I want to rent this house. Of course, he shows up on day one, and there's no door. Whose responsibility is it when you deliver a house? Does it have to include certain things? So what's expected? Says the Mishnah, Hamaskir, the owner who's renting it out, is chayav b'delet for a door, bin nagar. A nagar is Rashi's is sort of like the post that you're going to use to lock into, right? So you have to have something attached to the ground or attached to the wall that you can anchor the bolt in. And bimmanol, an actual lock itself. So these are sort of the hardware that are part of a purchase of a house. Not purchase, part of the use of the house. The balabayit, the owner of the house, has to provide. Ubechol davar shemase uman. Anything that's professional, anything that was professional grade, has to come from the owner. But things that are sort of easy to do on your own, which of course might change over time, right? The things that are done by the homeowner themselves, then the renter themselves, hasocher osel. And we'll see in the Gemara.
What's iskufa?
Iskufa is a
Rashi
mantle.
says, but bekorota iskufa.
Right, iskufa means a mantle, right? So their doors were a little different than ours, but you had to, because they were made out of stone, presumably, or I mean, they had wood on the stone. But it means on the mantle, which is what you attach the lock into, right? The lock has to go into something. Hazevel. Now, interestingly, right, you rent a house. Now, one of the side things in a house, we'll see in the Gemara again, the details, is that there's manure and compost produced in a yard from animals, from cooking. Who owns you rented the house? Do you get the zevel? It says the Mishnah Hazevel, the manure, shel balabayit. That belongs to the owner of the house. You rented the house. You didn't get all the garbage. It's not really garbage, right? Manure that's produced in that house. The renter only gets the products that came out of the ovens, right? So there's ash and things like that, which of course are also used for some kind of compost and nourishment. That it belongs to the renter.
Doesn't the person rents the house, doesn't he get the yard associated with the house?
Not necessarily. That's exactly what we're going to discuss in the Gemara, but not necessarily. We'll see the case. Tanu Rabbana. Now says the Bright, Maskir Bayit L'Chavero, if you rent a house to your friend or to another person, Maskir Chayev Lahamid Lo Delatot, you have to hang up the doors. Liftoch Lo Chalonot, you have to open up windows, right? Which usually meant opening a hole in the wall or the stone to make a window. The Chazek Lo Tikra, if the Rashi understands this all means if these things became weak, right? If there are repairs needed. So the Tikra, which is the plaster, right, was weakened or wormy and started falling apart, the landlord has to fix it. With smoch lo korah, if some of the support beams started bending a little bit, crumbling a little bit, the owner has to support those. But hasocher chayav lasot lo sulam. The things like that are, and again, these are just non-professional things like the ladder that helps you get up to the loft. That you have to, if the ladder falls apart, you have to replace it on your own. Lasot lo ma'aka, to make a fence around the roof, which is a halachic requirement. Lasot lo marzev, to make a gutter, which again was clearly not something professional then. You just had to put a piece of wood to help prevent the rain from falling on the side of the house. That is considered non-professional. Hatiach et gagon, to put some tar on top of the roof, or they necessarily use tar, but whatever they use to cover, whitewash to cover the roof, these are considered to be sort of normal things, and therefore the renter has to pay for it.
But is that only if it's not there? If these products are there in the first place, is the response to Chayev, the socher, to replace them? I mean, does they have to buy them fresh? Is the house unfurnished or is it furnished? Today you rent the house, yeah, the stove is there, the refrigerator is there.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So those are a few different things. So again, this all depends on minhag hamakom, but what our Mishnah is not addressing that question. It's addressing repairs to the house itself, not the furniture inside the house. I'm not exactly sure. Our Mishnah does not talk about stove, right? They didn't have refrigerators, obviously, but a stove, of course, is an essential feature to a house, and a stove is a pretty fixed thing. Our Mishnah does not address whether when you rent a house, you assume there's a stove or not a stove. I assume that, I actually don't know, but that might be something that has to be specified in the rental agreement.
Well, it
We're
does say
talking,
a yotze min hatanur, min kirayim.
no, that's referring, again, that's referring to whether you can keep those
The
pre.
ashes, but that presumes there's a tanur there, right?
Yeah, in that case, but what if there's not a tanur? Then maybe there doesn't have to be a tanur, right? The question is, do you have to provide one, right? Today, if you rent an apartment, you have to get a refrigerator right there, I guess, right? And the landlord has to provide it if you don't have one. It's not clear to me from our Mishnah whether the same is true about an oven or not, because I don't know that every house needs to have an oven. But we're talking about repairs, and we're talking not
Well,
just
he says la sot lo sulam. Is that a repair? It does there have to be
no,
a
no,
sulam there in the first place? And
not
then
there
if
in the
it
first.
breaks, he has to replace it, or does the land or does the renter
Both.
still care have to buy the sulam?
Both, right? So there's no responsibility on the owner to provide a ladder or to provide window shades, maybe. Those are things that you could provide, you don't have to provide, and it's up to you. You have no right to claim it. Again, unless you write it explicitly in your rental agreement. Obviously, you can always write whatever you want, but this is telling you what's the assumption. Says the Gemara now, mezuzah al mi. What about the mezuzah? What about it? We think that means hanging a mezuzah on the door. Says Gemara, mezuzah. Well, what kind of question is that? Everyone knows the Gemara in Avodah Zarah. Amar of Misharshia, mezuzah chovat hadarti. Mezuzah is not a responsibility of an owner of an apartment. It's a responsibility of the person who lives in an apartment, right? Based on the pasuk, right? So why? What's your question? Ella, no, you're right. The question is not mezuzah. Obviously, the person who rented the place has to provide the mezuzah. The question is the mekom mezuzah, right? Al mi. But you have to put a mezuzah on the door. Of course, it's not easy to put a mezuzah on the door if your door and your lintel and your whatever you call it are flush, right? There's no place to put the mezuzah. So what you have to do is you have to cut a hole into the doorpost to make space for a mezuzah. Now that could be very challenging, especially if it's made out of stone. To carve a hole into the stone is no simple feat. That's a very professional thing. So does the owner of the house have to provide a place for the renter to put his mezuzah?
Just as a point here, sorry, but you mentioned avodah zarah. Rashi says it's menachot. Are you saying there's something avodah zarah says something else? That Rashi says the mezuzah here is from the menachot, the darshim and menachos daf lamed daled.
It's in both places. But
Okay, I didn't know. Okay.
The Gemara is not what it's are. Rashi quotes the drasha of the Gemara from Chovat Adar. But it is true that the main sugya of mezuzah is in the second paragraph of Menachot. Says the Gemara. So again, focus. The question is, the place of the mezuzah. Who has to make the hardware basically for a place for the mezuzah to be? So says Rav Sheshet Tznitua, there's a brayta because the brayta based on our Mishnah. It says davar she'ein maseh uman hasucher oseh. Anything that's a non-professional thing, the renter has to do. So making a hole in the doorway is a small thing. You go and you knock a little hole in the doorway. It's not, you don't need to go get a professional crew. L'hainami lav maseh uman. Now, why is this considered not to be professional? I just told you that it could be a stone doorway, in which case you got to go get your jackhammer to knock out a hole. That seems very professional to me. Says Gemara, you're right. If you wanted to do it cleanly, you'd have to do that. But you don't have to do it the way, because efshar hu the gufta dekana. You can do it through a gufta dekana, which means like a reed. You could basically take a reed and you could suspend it from the top of the door and hang the mezuzah that way. So you don't actually have to make a hole in the stone in order to hang your mezuzah. You can have a hanging mezuzah, which might not be as nice and as fancy and as beautiful, but it's possible to do it by bootlegging it, basically, by doing it non-professionally, in which case it's a responsibility of the renter to do that. Tanu Rabbanan. Says the Bright on top of Daf Kuf Bet Amud Aleph. A maskir bayit l'chavero, a person who rents a house to somebody else, ala socher lasot lo mezuzah, like we just said, it's the renter who has to hang the mezuzah. Ukeshu yotzei, but when you leave the house that you rent, lo yit, it's a whole discussion. This is also true about whether you sell a house, but lo yitlena, you're not supposed to take the mezuzot with you, even though it was your responsibility to hang them. Biyadov yotzei, and minachri, but if you sell it to a non-Jew, right, then you should be no biyadov yotzei, because you don't want to leave the mezuzah in a place where they might not treat it with respect, or probably won't treat it with respect. Umaseh be'achad, and there was actually a story of someone who not biyadov yotzei took the mezuzot with him when he left. And he was cursed, and his wife and his children died, and he buried them. Says Gemara, that story doesn't seem to make any sense. You just said you're allowed to take it if it's a non-Jew. So Maaseh, the story is contradictory. Amar of Sheshet, Aresha. No, we're going back. It was a case where you sold it to a Jew, or you rented it, you left, and a Jew was moving in, and the person took the mezuzot, and therefore they removed some of the protection. This is one understanding. They removed the protection from the house, and therefore they were punished by having their own protection being removed and a tragedy happening in their family.
No, but wait a second. He's not renting. If a renter rents a house from a balabayit, he leaves the house. He doesn't know who's going to rent it next, whether it's a Jew or a non-Jew. Why should
Well,
it
you
be his
might-
responsibility
Well, you
to
should find out. It's well, obviously the case we're talking about is where you know that it's a Jew. That's the case. You're asking what happens if you don't know who it is. So it's a good question.
but it's not his respect, but it's not his
It is
house
his-
to
that's
rent.
so the Bright is saying it's your responsibility. If you know that they're renting it to the next person who's a Jew, you have to leave your mezuzot. You don't have to. You should. Otherwise, you're subject to bad fortune. And this is brought halacha. People are very strict about this because obviously they don't want to bury their wife and kids. But you know, there's all kinds of discussions on halacha. What you can, and this is what we did when we moved. You took down the mezuzot and we hung up cheaper ones. We went and bought like 10 mezuzot, which was not so inexpensive, and hung those because we wanted to keep our own. You don't have to leave the cases, obviously, right? And they don't have to be as good quality. But also if it's going to be vacant, if they're going to be renovations and you're worried it's going to get ruined, right? There's all kinds of ways, sort of, not all kinds of, but some ways to get around it. Says the Gemara now, the first two dots at the top of Kuf Bet Amud Aleph. Hazevel shel bayit, the garbage, the manure belongs to the owner of the house. The renter only gets to keep not the garbage, like the waste that's produced from the oven and the tanur and kirayim are two different kinds of ovens. Says Gemara b'mayaskina. I don't get it. As you said earlier, Ken, what's the situation here? Did you rent the courtyard? Did you not rent the courtyard? You know, the cows don't come into the house and poop, but they come into the field, right? So is it b'mayaskin? If you rented your courtyard to this guy and it's his cows and his cows poop in the courtyard, of course he gets to keep that manure, right? Why in the world would the owner of the house get to keep the manure? Amaisha balabayit. Of course, why would it go to the owner? Ella must be b'chatzar de lo agri the socher. You know what happened is that you rented him your house and you didn't rent him the courtyard, and Ture Demaskir. And it's the owner has his own cows staying in the yard. This man rents his outhouse next to it. Not outhouse is, a small house. And so he doesn't get to keep the manure. That's pshita. It seems to be pretty obvious. He didn't rent it. It's not his cows. Why would he get to keep it? Lotzricha says where you're right. Obviously, those two cases are obvious. The case of our Mishnah is where it is a little bit more complex. It's b'chatzer demaskir. The chatzer belongs to the owner, meaning you did not rent the chatzer. So you have a house. Let's say I'm the renter. I said I want to rent your house, and around the house is a beautiful field, which is not a beautiful courtyard, which I did not rent. But the cows that come or I'm using cows because they're easy to use, right? But the Gemara does use them. But the cows that come and do their business in the courtyard come not from the owner of the courtyard. They are just random cows, basically. Turi da atuma alma kamuba. Right? These are basically cows from outside that happen to stop by this courtyard and defecate. In which case, there's a debate. Who should get that? This guy who's living there and sort of it's proximate to him, or should it be the owner of the courtyard? And the Mishnah then says that it is not you. It's the owner. Don't touch you. It's the owner of the courtyard. This, in fact, supports Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. Then Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, that the fact is that this owner, there's an owner and the renter, right? The owner of the balabayit, it's his courtyard, and therefore an animal that comes from outside that drops its dung in the middle of his courtyard, that is acquired, it's kinyan of the owner of the courtyard, even though he has no idea that it's there, right? He doesn't see it, he's not there, but you are konesh midato. So then the person who's living next door can't go pick it up and say, oh, this is hefker. It's because it's in the courtyard of the owner, it belongs to the owner, and that supports Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina's statement that your chatzer is koneh even without your dot.
Does he have to notify the owner? The owner's living in San Francisco.
Right.
And the owner doesn't even know about that. Does he have to allow the manure to pile up for 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, if he can't get into the house because there's manure, I guess he could complain. But I mean, there's no responsibility, right? Dam Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, right? We just read that. That chatzer is koneh shelo midata. Meitvei. Ask the Gemara, what about the following Braita? The Braita says, Imamar, if let's say a person says, there's a lot of things are happening. Let's say a flock of goats or birds is traveling through town and depositing in different people's chatzerot. These are basically metziot, right? They're hefker. Anyone who gets them should be able to acquire them. And a guy says, Kol metziot she'yavo tochi hayom, tocho hayom tiknu li chatzerai. He says, I don't know what's happening in my courtyard. I'm not there. It's a half mile away from here. I hear that there's a lot of things happening. A lot of things are coming in. Anything that drops there today, I want my chatzor to be koneh. This is my intention. Says the Braita lo amar klum, right? That doesn't mean anything. You're just speaking words. You have no idea what's happening. You're not actually intentionally acquiring anything. Says Gemara, but if Rabbi Yosef Chanina is right that you don't even need to know about it. So of course, why would the Braita say you're not koneh? You don't even need to say this, and you should be koneh, right? Why is your words meaningless? Answers the Gemara. This is talking about a case where Hachamai Skinan. It's talking about where you have a courtyard that doesn't have fences around it. It's not protected. In which case, that's a whole different story. Because even if you wanted it to be koneh, it wouldn't be koneh because since basically the fact that something is there does not mean that other people are not going to come take it, right? Because it's not mishtamer, it's not protected. And so therefore, things can walk in and out, people will come in and out, and that's why your chatzer is not koneh. It's not because your intention wasn't there. It's because the chatzer is not considered to be an enclosed property or a protected property. And as we said earlier, many times, a chatzer that's not a protected property is not koneh as a chatzer. This is where at Ihachi, well then keep reading the Braita. It doesn't make any sense. Ema Sefer, look at the next part. It says, what if people know, Yatzalo Shem Metzia Be'ir, there's a word going out in the city that, oh, by the way, a lot of flocks of geese, let's just say, dropped into the field of Reuven. And then Reuven says, oh, I want anything in my field to be mine. Then dvarav kayamim. Then his words actually do work because there's a specific mitzvah that he's saying it about. So, but if the issue here is that the chatzer is not watched, it's not protected. So what if he knows about it and he wants it? It's not considered to be an enclosed property. Who cares if everybody heard that there's something, a mitzvah, find or a hefker thing is going to be there? It shouldn't matter, right? So who cares? Says where this very interesting answer. That the answer is that you know what? Kivan diyatzal Hashem mitzvah be'ir mivdo badili inashmina. Since people know, everyone is talking about this, and they know that this mitzvah, this flock of geese or whatever, I'm using flock of geese because it's the next Gemara, but this, this wild thing or this object landed in his field, other people are no longer come into the chatzer and take it because everybody knows about it. So it's not clear exactly why, but maybe because people will say, oh, where'd you get that? Did you go into someone else's field and get it? So it sort of takes the stigma on other people entering into his field. And therefore, although there are no walls on his field, it makes it essentially a protected space. And so therefore, because Yatzalo Shem Metzia Be'ir, where am I? Mivdo Badili Inishmina, people will separate, will not go into his chatzer and take those things. And therefore it becomes, Havale ki chatzer mishtamer. And therefore it becomes like a chatzer mishtamer. So according to the way we're understanding this, it's still a little bit challenging because we're trying to understand this, that it really has nothing to do with what he says. It has to do with whether it's known that there are things in his field or not. If there are known that there are things there, and I guess he says, well, I guess it does that too, because he says, I want them, then other people are not going to come in and take them, and therefore his chatzer is koneh, but otherwise his chatzer is not koneh. Metzia.
You have to define the borders though, right? I mean, there has to, even though the field is wide open, someone has to know where the legal borders are.
Correct. No, you're right. It has to be in his chatzer. Right? The mechanism of kinyan is still his chatzer. It's not his intent. So it has to be in his chatzer. The question is considered a chatzer mishtameret or not? Excuse me. Metzia. We're halfway down. Says the Gemara, what about our Mishnah? Our Mishnah says, well, actually a Braita on our Mishnah, it says, Zevel hayotzei min hatanur min hakirayim. Let's say you have Zevel, which is again garbage, but it means garbage that's usable for planting and compost and manure and that kind of stuff. And it comes out of the oven or min hakirayim, right? From the different kinds of ovens. The hakole min ha'avir. And that which you catch in the air, which we think means, it sounds like what it means, is that the animal is pooping and you catch the dung before it hits the ground, right? So then, harehu shelo, then the renter gets to keep it, okay? Because it never touched the ground. But sheberefet, shebechatzer, but that which got into the refet, which is the animal pen, and the chatzer, and into the yard, which is presumably is on the ground, that belongs to shel bal habayit. Okay, so basically, this is the same thing as our Mishnah, except we added one case, which is catching the dung in the air. Says the Gemara, If Rabbi Chanina is correct, then why in the world, if you catch him in the air, are you koneh? Why does it belong to the renter? Avir chatzerohu. What the air of the chatzer is the chatzer. Chatzer is not the land of the chatzer; it's the space. So once the animal excreted this thing and it went into the air of the chatzer, so what if you catch it right away? It already belongs to the balabayit, right? Says the Gemara, Amar Abaya. No, it's talking about a case where it didn't actually enter the air. It's been madbik kli b'shulei para. You put a diaper on the para, right? So therefore, it immediately went into your container, your manure container for what's called for composting.
I was going to say put a pail under the cow.
I mean, I'm sure it needs a pail, not a diaper.
And they could catch the and he
It's
sort
a
of
kli.
and he, whenever he catches his pail, the renter owns the pail and he puts the pail.
Right. Well, the point is it has to not go into the air. Correct. I mean, I'm sure it's talking about a pail. But says Rava, no, that's not true. It doesn't have to be a pail. It could be you're sitting there and catching it. Because Avir Shein Sofalanuach Lav Kamunach Dami. Rava says, you know what? If you have air, but it doesn't land, air of a chatzer is only koneh if it's something that's going to land on the floor. The chatzer is koneh before it hits the land because it's in the air of the chatzer. But if it's never going to hit the floor because this guy is waiting to catch it, then the avir of the chatzer does not have the status of the chatzer, and the owner of the chatzer is not koneh through the air. Is that true? The Rava is so laissez-faire, so pasha to him that's the case. Right? It was a question that Rava had. The boy Rava, we had earlier, the first parak, they asked a question of Rava. Rava asked a question, sorry. Zarak arniki b'petach zeh. Let's say a person says, I want to give you my wallet full of, $10,000. And he throws it into a house. But the throw is so good that it enters the house through the front window. And before someone in the house can catch it, it keeps flying and it leaves out the back window of the house. Okay? So you throw a arniki, which means a purse, the petach zeh, through one doorway of the house, and it leaves the house, it never stops, no one catches it, no, it doesn't hit the ground, through another doorway. So it goes out straight through the back of the house. Mahu. Is the house or the owner of the house koneh that purse? What do you say? Do you say avir she'ein sofa lenuach kamunach dami, that it's in the airspace of the house? So at that moment, it was koneh to the owner of the house, even though it's not going to stop. It never is going to land in the house. Oh dilma, or do you say oh lav kamunach dami, right? So therefore, Rava asked the question, and he didn't have a resolution. So why earlier in the Masechet was Rava so unclear about the halacha? But now Rava is obvious that it's just considered not to be in the airspace of the house. Says well, hatam lo mifsak. There it's a little bit different because there you don't know for sure that it wasn't going to stop. It might have stopped in the house. So there was some doubt. Here, this guy is standing under the cow with his pan ready to catch all the manure. And so therefore, there's no question that it wasn't going to hit the ground, and therefore the air is for sure not koneh, right? Sorry, there nothing interrupted it. It just happened to fly through it. Hacha mifsak kli. Here, the kli, the container that the renter was holding, is actually separating from the ground and therefore preventing it from ever landing.
But it would have landed on the ground if he didn't put the pail there.
But we're assuming at the time that the cow produced it, the pail was already there, right? So therefore, there was not a moment that it was in the air and there was any doubt in the situation.
That sounds like the Gemara in Shabbat, where we're shooting something on Akira of Anacha, and it flies through the air. Does it land? It's all Gemara there.
It's true. We had very similar case. Now remember, Shabbat, the halachot of Shabbat and the halachot of Kinyan are not always the same, right?
Right.
Partly because what you just said. But you're right. We had many cases in Shabbat where you threw things and they went through the air and they didn't stop, or they did stop, etc. Said the final thing in our Mishnah, Sheberefet Shebechatzer. If it's a refet means, I think it means a pen, basically, right? And a chatzer, which means a courtyard. If the dung falls in those places, harei elu shel bal habayit. That was actually our bright that said that. It belongs to the bal habayit, okay? Tarti says, why do you tell me both cases? They seem pretty repetitive, right? A refet and a chatzer are both basically places where you keep animals. Amar Abaya Hachikama. What it means is it's refet shebechatzer harei shel bal habayit. It means a refet. Excuse me, it's in the chatzer would belong to the bal habayit, meaning Rashi understands that it means that you basically you rented the chatzer to the own, you rented out your house and your chatzer, but you left behind a pen that you didn't rent. And therefore, because you left behind the pen, any dung that's in that pen stays with the balabayit. So and then Rashi says that understands the Chiddush is really unrelated. It's just that you basically don't necessarily rent out your refet when you rent out your chatzer. Rav Sheshet, this is what Rav Sheshet said.
And the refet is Rashi seems to say the refet's within the chatzer.
Correct. It's
so
a
then the
separate
balabayit still has access to that refet, apparently, through the chatzer that essentially belongs to the renter.
It's a separate enclosure within the chatzer. Says Rav Ashi, Zot Amerik, this is in fact what we've said, Hamaskir chatzero stam lo skir refet sheba. If you rent out your chatzer, you don't specify that you want to include the refet, you don't include the refet. So even though you said I'm renting you my whole courtyard, that does not mean my whole courtyard. It excludes the chicken pen and then this and then that, things that are sort of separate containers within that courtyard. Mate, they asked the Gemara, what about the following bright? It says, Yonei shovach, Yonei aliyah. These are birds, pigeons, basically, that are shovach means that they sort of are in a dovecote, right? In a shovach, I don't know how you translate in English, like a place where you keep birds, right? A dove cage. No, but like they have houses for them. Oh. Okay. Or a yonei aliyah. These are yonim that live in your attic, right? Which means that they're not sort of super domesticated, but they come home every night and they go out and they eat every they go out during the day and they fly around in Central Park and then they come back at night. Yeah, he says a dovecote. This is translation, whatever that means. Chayavot b'shilach. Those are birds that you have to, if you're going to take the eggs from them, you have to send away the mother, like the Torah says, shalech t'shalach ta'im. You have to send off the mother before you take the eggs. But asurot begezel, people are not allowed to take those pigeons, right? If they find them in the wild, because even though they're not really mine, I don't really own them because they don't, I don't control them. They just come back to my field, my barn every night. But they prohibit them, other people from taking them, mishum darkei shalom, because of drabanan, because basically people feel attachment to them and it will lead to bad situations. Says the Gemara, 1 second. This bright implies that you don't truly own those pigeons, and that's why you have to send them away if you're going to take the eggs. And the Isur of Gezel only drabanan. But why don't you own them if they come to your courtyard every night? The Mita lahadram Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, for which Chanina is correct. The chatzero shel adam konel shalom midato. Why don't you say that you own these? You're in your chatzer. You don't have to have any dat even. They come to your chatzer every night. They belong to you. In which case, if they belong to you, you don't have to send away the mother. V'karikan ki kare. And the Torah says if you happen upon a bird, and we understand from the drasha that means prat l'kansi, prat l'mizuman. Meaning not that you're raising them. You don't own them. It's a wild bird that you're chayiv in shiluach hakein. You're not chayiv in shiluach hakein if you own the mother, right? Says Rava, well, the issue here is somewhat different. It's because, think about the egg. The beitza, b'yetziat rubahu dechayiv le'b'shiluach. Once the egg starts coming out of the mother, and the mother lays part of that, most of that egg, now, if you want that egg, you have to send away the mother birds. You're chayiv in shiluach hakein. But the mikna lokanya, you as the owner of the courtyard, don't acquire the egg that's in your courtyard until it actually completely drops. Until it falls into your chatzer. And at that time, you already were chayav in shiluach hakein. Right? You're chayav in shiluach hakein before it falls into your chatzer. And so therefore that isser came already and it can't go away just because you acquired it. So you're chayav at that time. He says,
what's the point here? I know, I'm not sure what it's chayav when. Chayav for which? For the shluch hatakan when, but he doesn't own the bird. I mean, or he does own the bird, or what?
It doesn't matter if he owns the bird or not. He doesn't own the bird, but he owns the egg. But the point is that you don't have to do shluch hakein if you own the egg. You only have to do shluch hakein if it's a wild egg. But the point here is that even though this egg is in your chatzer, and your chatzer should be kona shalom midato, you were already chayiv in shluch hakein before the egg actually fell into your chatzer because it was just coming out of the mother, and so the chiyuv of shluch hakein happened before you acquired it with your chatzer. So if you owned the mother, that would be fine, right? Then of course you'd own everything that came out of it. You don't own the mother, but you do own the egg. But it doesn't matter that you own the egg because you were chayiv in shluch hakein even before the egg came, and that is why yachi amaya surat mishum gezel. So then why is it prohibited mishum gezel if you don't really own it? That's iman. The mother is chayav mishum gezel because she actually is, again, it's drabanan, is coming gezel darkei shalom, right? Because it is coming into your field every night, your barn every night, and people view it, although it's not really yours, It is viewed as being yours. Another answer, second line now, second wide line. Lolam abitzim. No, we're talking about the eggs. This once the rove of the egg comes out, even though it's not yours technically, until it falls into the courtyard, and at that point already it was chayv shiluch hakein, still you think it's yours. Date alayo, your mind is on it, meaning you're assuming it's yours. And when we come to this question of darkei shalom, right, even though halachically it might not be yours, we want to respect people's assumptions for peace, and that's why we say it's a surat migezel mishum darkei shalom. And says the Gemara, Hashadamar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, since Rav Yehuda Amar Rav said, Asur l'zakot bebeitzim kosman she'em ravetzet aleihem, that it's prohibited actually to acquire eggs when the mother is still sitting on top of them. Shenemar, because the pasuk says, first first send off the mother, and then you can take the eggs. Afilu tem, you could say denaflo lechatzera, right? You could say that in fact these eggs fell into your chatzer, right? And therefore, your question is, why do you have to do shiluch hakein? These eggs are in your chatzer; they're your eggs. But the answer is that you cannot acquire the eggs because wherever the owner person can go and take the egg, then his chatzer acts in his absence to acquire it for him. But here, because you're technically halachically prohibited from taking this egg, because you have to send off the mother, and the mother's still sitting on the egg, right? Wherever he personally is not allowed to, not because of kinyanim, but because of isser. Right? Because the Torah says, don't take an egg when the mother's sitting on it. So therefore, your chatzir also cannot acquire egg when the mother's sitting on it. Says the Gemara, I don't get it. If that's the case, why do you say asurat begezel darkei shalom? That then, so remember, you have to do shiluch hakein because you don't really own it. But we say it's also mishum gezel because of drabanan, because of darkei shalom. If that's the case, I don't get it. What did you send off the mother or not send off the mother? If you send off the mother, then you're allowed to acquire the eggs. And then it's gezel ma'alya. Then if someone takes these eggs, they're stealing from you. Gezel ma'alya. Idelo shalcha. If you didn't send off the mother, what do you mean it's asur mishum gezel mishum darkei shalom? They're not yours yet. Haba yishlucha. Right? The person who's stealing it basically can't, or we call it stealing, they'd have to send off the mother in order to take the eggs, right? So there's no, I don't get what the case is. Who's asur mishum gezel because of darkei shalom? They should be asur either because it's real gezel, because you, the owner of the courtyard, sent off the mother, and therefore you own the eggs, or you didn't send off the mother, in which case the person who takes the eggs is over on the Isser Doraita of taking eggs from Shiluch Haken. What's the Durabanan?
Who's stealing the eggs here? Who's the one who's quote unquote stealing them?
A foreigner, so another person, not the owner of the Chatzer. So the Mishnah, the Raita said, don't take the eggs because it's Durabanan Isser of Gezel. Says Gemara, it's not a Durabanan Isser of Gezel. Either the owner of the courtyard already sent away the mother, in which case he owns the eggs and it's Isser Gezel Doraita, or you didn't send to the mother and the owner of the courtyard doesn't own the eggs, but the person stealing the eggs is over an Isser Doraita of Shiluch Haken, right? So what's the Isser? Why are you coming on to this Isser of Gezel Midrabanan? It's either an Isser Doraita of Gezel or it's an Isser Doraita of Shiluch Haken. Answers the Gemara.
But the Shiluch Haken applies to
everyone.
Birds that are not owned, right? If you own the birds, there's no Shiluch Haken.
It's the eggs. We're talking about the eggs. The eggs
I understand that, but you still they send away the mother. It has to be a mother bird that you don't have ownership on.
So it's not a question of ownership. It's a question of what's called mizuman, meaning it's prepared for this. But
the point is, it has to be a bird that you. Right, so it's not your bird. The bird happens to be there.
That's the case here, right? So the person who's stealing the eggs does not own the mother bird, right? So either he's stealing the eggs and it's an Isser Doraita, or he's stealing eggs and it's not stealing, but he's over on Shiluch Haken. So says the Gemara, who in the world is Isser Drabanan? Answers the Gemara, we're talking about a katan. We're talking about the person coming to take the eggs is a little boy who lives next door, who's 8 years old. And therefore a katan who doesn't have to do Shiluch Haken. Delav bar Shiluchu. A katan doesn't have Issurs of the Torah of Shiluch Haken. So this katan comes along and he says, look, I'm going to steal these eggs. Right? Because the mother's sitting on top of them. I'm going to pull out the eggs from under the mother. I don't have to do Shiluch Haken. And these eggs are not owned yet by the Baal Chatzer, because the Baal Chatzer only owns the eggs once the mother flies away. The mother hasn't flown away. I have a great opportunity to take these eggs. Said the Rabbanan, whoa. That's an Isser Drabanan because of Darkei Shalom. We don't want little kids coming and stealing all your eggs. Says the Gemara, well, if it's a katan, we don't usually make isurim on katan, right?
Yeah.
Katan bar darkei shalom. You can't say the kid can't do it because it's not, appropriate. Answers no, what we're saying is aviv shel katan. The father of the katan would have to reimburse the owner mipnei darkei shalom, right? Aviv shel katan chayav lachzir lo mipnei darkei shalom. In fact, that's a great loophole, right? Send your little kids over to steal for you. People have been doing this for time immemorial, and no one can hold them responsible. And it's not an Isser Doraita, because remember, the owner of the courtyard does not own the eggs yet, because as long as the mother is sitting on them, he can't acquire them. So the kid should come. The kid doesn't have to do shiluch hakein. The kid will steal the eggs. That, of course, will lead to all kinds of fights. The Chachamim said if the father of the kid is responsible to pay back his debts. That's the explanation.
When do they do? When do they actually perform shluchat haken? Because the mother has to be in the area, right? But not exactly sitting on the eggs.
No, she has to be sitting on the eggs. No, shiluch hakein is you send her off the eggs. If she's off the eggs, then you don't have to do shiluch hakein. There's no mother on it. Remember, it's a aim rovetzet alabanim.
But you're not supposed to send the mother when she's sitting on the eggs, right?
Yeah, that's when you send the mother away.
No, you don't. Isn't that what we say? We don't send when she's sitting on the eggs. You don't take the eggs.
No,
when she's sitting on them.
You don't take the eggs without sending the mother away. You send the mother away and then you take the eggs.
So you can send the mother away while she's sitting on the eggs.
Correct, and then you keep the eggs. Says the Mishnah, Hamaskir b'ayit l'chaver l'shana. Let's say the most classic case. We only have 7 minutes. We're going to do this. You rent a house to a friend for a year. Okay. I say, you can live in this house. You pay me $1 million or $1,000. You get this house for the next year. And then, of course, what happens is they make it into a leap year, which nobody knew about, right? When you started the agreement. Nitabra shana. So it doesn't matter. You rented it for a year. The year became longer. You get a longer stay. You don't have to pay more rent. Nitabra l'socher. The renter gets the extra month because he had a year. This is a new year. But if you rent it to him for months, I mean, you say, I'll rent it to you by the month, right? Say 12 months or whatever. You don't have to pick a number, but you're paying $1,000 a month. Then if netabra shana, netabra lamaskir, then you got to pay another month's rent because you're doing it by months and another month was added. There was a story in Tzipori, which we're going to elaborate on in the Gemara, where a person said, I'm going to rent your bathhouse for 12 gold coins for the year, 1 gold coin per month. So this is a little confusing because you did both. He said, I'm going to pay you 12 for the year. That's 1 per month, right? Dinar zahav l'chodesh. And of course, they then made it into a leap year. And the question was, does the 13th month mean you have to pay 13 or you still only pay 12? Turn the page. And they said, neither. It's not the maskir, it's not the socher, they split it. Yachloku et chodesh hayibor, you pay half rent for the leap month. Says the Gemara, that story seems to contradict the first part of the Mishnah. Maseh l'stor. That's the second time we said this today, right? It's a story that contradicts what we just said, right? Because the Mishnah said either it's the renter or it's the owner. It didn't say anything about splitting it. Says the Gemara, you're right. Obviously, this is a more complicated case where they said both things. So chasurim and chasra, there are sort of context and words missing in our Mishnah that you have to add in. And this is how you should read it. V'im amarlo, the Mishnah then continues and said, if you said to him both details, b'shneim asar zehuvim l'shana, midinar zahav l'chodesh. So you speak out both relationships. I'm lending it to you for 12 coins for a year, 1 coin per month. So if you said 12 for a year, then the extra month would be free. If you said 1 per month, the extra month would cost another coin. But you said both. So what happens then? Says our Mishnah, Yachloko, then you split it. And Maaseh Nami, and now we quote the Mishnah. What
does he split? The last month?
Yeah.
He only pays half?
You only pay half.
Half the gold coin.
Sorry?
Half the gold coin.
Yes, half a gold coin. U'maaseh nami b'tzipori, b'achad shesachar merchatz michavero b'shneim zuvim l'shana midinar zahav l'chodesh, u'ma maaseh fnei Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel fnei Rabbi Yossi v'amar yachlok et chodesh hayibor. So that is our Mishnah. That's how you understand the Mishnah. We think right now we're going to keep discussing this, that this is probably because I'm maman mutal b'safek, right? There's no way to resolve this. You either pay it or you don't pay it, but we just have no way to know because you said 2 things that are contradictory. One would require you to pay an extra coin. One would require you to get a free month. And since you said both, and each guy is a good claim, you basically split it, okay? Which is not an uncommon principle that we have quoted in the name of Sumchus many, many, many times. Says Rav, Havi hatam. Says Rav, I don't want to disagree with the Mishnah, but I'm about to. If I was there in this story that happened in Sipori, have a hivna like kula lamaskir, I would have given the entire extra month of rent to the maskir, meaning I would have made him pay an entire extra month. Says the Gemara, what's Rav's chiddush? My kamashma, what is Rav's opinion? That tefos lashon acharon. He seems to be implying that you go after the last thing you say. So if you make a contract and you say, this contract is for the house for 1 year for 12 zav, right? And one a month, then the one a month trumps everything. And since you said one a month second, that's what you got to pay. And if there's a 13th month, you pay an extra coin, right? Says Gemara, that's an interesting halacha that Rav holds, but Rav already told us that. Amar Rav chadazimna, Amar Rav chadazimna. Amar Rav Huna, Amri Bei Rav. Rav Huna is quoted as saying in the name of Bei Rav, which of course is the house of Rav. If a person says the following, he says, I'll give you a stira, I'll buy your car from you for an astira. Now, an astira is usually 96 shekel, not shekel, 96 prutot, 96 pennies, basically, okay? But sometimes, of course, pennies could be smaller, sometimes in there for the less valuable, sometimes the astira could be bigger, whatever. So you say, mastira mea mai. I'm giving you an astira 100 coins. Right? So that's contradictory because one says 96 and one says 100. Or you say the opposite. You say mea mai. I'm sorry. Then you have to pay mea mai. You have to pay 100 coins because that's the second thing you said. If you say the opposite, I'll give you mea mai astira. I'll give you 100 coins, a 96 coiner. Then astira. Then you only pay 96. So Rav already told us that basically, if you say things that are sort of contradictory, they're close, they're not that far off, right? Then we assume you mean the second one. Says, no, that would not have proven to me that Rav holds this. If from that case, I would have thought there, it's not because you said two contradictory things. You explained yourself. Perushi kamifarish. You were explaining what you meant. Come on, right? Meaning you were saying, I'm going to give you 100 pennies. I mean a coin that's worth 96, right? Meaning it's very similar, and it's the way you pay 100. It's not saying I'm going to give you 100 pennies because that's really unwieldy. I'm going to give you a 96 coin, in which case that's what you mean. I wouldn't have known that if you say two things that are really contradictory, you say, I'll pay you 12 for the year, 1 per month, right? That you necessarily go with the second thing, kamash molan Rav, that you do. And that's Rav's opinion, that tfos lashon achron, and he argues with our Mishnah, which is a pretty bold thing to do, okay? Shmuel says, I disagree. You know what I think the case is here? It's Bava be'emtza chodesh askina. We're talking in our Mishnah where it says that you pay half. It's where the renter and the owner showed up in the middle of the 13th month. And he said, look, it's Adar Sheni. You get an extra month. You didn't pay me for this month. Now, when are you supposed to pay your rent? Everyone knows you pay your rent at the end of the month. That's not what we
First
do.
of the month.
I know, but they paid at the end. Because remember, we hold ein l'schirut el l'besof. So you pay at the end. So you pay your rent at the end of the month, right? So what happened here is that in the middle of the month, the owner came and said, okay, it's time to pay up, right? And therefore, the person has to pay, but they only have to pay half because it is basically, if they want to stay, they have to pay half for the rest of the month. But if the owner comes at the beginning of the month and says, I want you to pay, you have to pay for the whole month. Kula l'maskir. But b'sof chodesh, if you come at the end of the month, then you don't have to pay anything. Kulo l'socher. You don't have to pay anything because according to Shmuel, basically, you say, it doesn't matter. You don't say tfos lashon acharon. You say it's a suffix. And remember, mamona mutal b'suffix. It depends on hamotzmi chaver lavaraya, right? So if you come at the end of the month, you'd have to prove that I have to pay you. You can't prove that I have to pay you because I said both things. If you come in the beginning of the month, I have to prove that I don't have to pay you. And so the responsibility falls on whenever, depending on what time you came during the month. But you'd have to prove either party what was meant in the original agreement. It says
Maman mutal b'safek, according to Sumchas, is yachlochu.
correct. But Shmuel is saying it's not necessarily going according to Sumchas. It's going based on the principle of hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. So you'd have to prove it.
So he doesn't hold like Sumchas.
Not necessarily, correct. And he also doesn't hold tefos lashon acharon like Rav. Says more, is that true? Me Amar Shmuel lo amin tefos lashon acharon. Does Shmuel not hold that you go after the second thing that a person says? Rav and Shmuel Damar Tervayo. Rav and Shmuel both said in the following case. Let's say a person goes to somebody else and says to them, look, I want to sell you a core. A core is 30 sa'ah, right? So it's a lot. I'm going to sell you a core of wheat, 30 bushels of wheat, let's say, bishloshim, for 30 gold coins, okay? Ani mocher lecha. And the guy gives him the money. Remember, we always said money does not koneh. Mishicha is koneh. So he starts taking delivery of the bushels of wheat. Says the Braita, if you take 29 bushels of wheat and you're not up to the 30th one yet, the deal is not done yet because Mashiach is only koneh when you're Mashiach of everything. And the owner can say, I changed my mind. I want a new price until you've actually picked up the 30th bundle, right? So if you bought core 30 bundles, b'shloshim, ani mocher lecha, yachol lachzor bo afilo b'sa'ah achrona. You can go back on the deal. It's not consummated until you pick up the 30th one. Even, until you're up to that one, you can still go back on the deal. But that's the first case.
But isn't there the curse of Mishapara?
Maybe, but that's separate. But it doesn't, it's not a kinyan. But if you say the following, kor b'shloshim sa'ah b'sela ani mocher lecha, I will sell you a core for 30, one sa'ah for each sela, right? So then you basically are saying each one I'm selling you individually. Then Rishon kana. If you pick up 29, you're kona 29. You can go back on the 30th, but you can't go back on the first 29. But that clearly tells you that you go after Tfos Lashon Acharon. Because the Lashon Rishon you said was 30 for 30, right? The Lashon Acharon was 1 per 1. So if you say that it doesn't go back on the deal because you already picked up 29, it means you go Tfos Lashon Acharon.
That's
right?
Rav.
It's Rav and Shmuel. Rav and Shmuel. Says the Gemara, Hatam, time of mine, Mishum Tfos. There, clearly it's because you go after the last language. Hachanam Katafis. Why don't you do the same thing? Rav Nach, there, right. So there, sorry, I take it back. There, this is an answer. Time of Mishum Tafis, right? There, the reason is because you actually picked up the thing, right? And Rav Shmuel is Rashi understands is that Shmuel is still unsure whether you go to Fos Lashon Acharon or not. But in that case, because the man actually picked them up and he's holding on to these 29 bushels, you can't take it back from him. It says but here too, it should be a question on Shmuel that you're actually grabbing the thing, right? Meaning you're living in the house. And that's why Shmuel said it really depends on when in the month the owner came and demanded his rent. Because if it's at the end of the month, it's too late. You can't collect it from me. You have to prove for me that I have to pay it. You can't prove. Here, in the beginning of the month, you'd be able to prove it. Now, you can't prove it, but if you want to stay, you got to pay. Rav Nachman says that, you know what? Karka b'cheskat ba'ala kayama. That I disagree with Rav and I disagree with Shmuel. And in fact, even if the owner comes at the end of the month and says, you have to pay me, and the renter says, I don't have to pay you, the deal was, I have to pay for a year, the owner can say, look, it's a suffix, but the karka is in my possession. I am definitely the owner. And you're living here. And so you have to prove that you don't have to pay it. And since you can't prove that, you'd have to pay it. So Rav Nachman says that land always goes with cheskat ba'aleh kayamet. And therefore, basically, if there was a suffix, you would have to pay. Why don't you have to pay in our case? My kamash malan, it's because it's tfos lashon acharon, right? That is because it's tfos lashon acharon. You go after the last thing. So Hainu the Rav. So all Rav Nachman is saying is the same thing of Rav. And so no. Rav Nachman is saying much more than Rav. Because Rav Nachman is saying that you don't have to pay af agav de afir meibach. Even if you switch the language and you say, I'll pay you 1 per month, 12 per year, then according to Rav, you would go to Lashon Acharon, you would not have to pay for the extra month. But according to Rav Nachman, you always pay for the extra month because since we don't know which language matters, and the owner of the field, the owner of the house is the muhzak, the renter has to prove, and he can't prove because there's no way to prove that he's patur or he has to pay. So Rav Nachman is very big in owner's rights, land owner rights. But let's.
Well, we were saying yesterday, right, that the either party, either the balabayit or the socher, has to give 30-day notice. Let's say 30, 50, whatever, a notice if he's going to leave. And if he doesn't, he's allowed to stay there as long as he continues to pay rent. So that seems to contradict this. It's true, the owner owns the land, but the balabai can continue to stay there as long as he pays.
Yeah, but the question is, you have to pay for that extra month. Again, we talked yesterday, you have to keep paying rent, right? As long as you're there. The question we have here is, remember, you rented it for an annual fee and you rented it for a monthly fee. How do you view the month that's Ibur? So that's the machloket. Who has to prove? And the answer we've been saying here is that according to Rav, it doesn't matter. It's not a machloket. It's not a question. It depends on what order you said it in. But according to everybody else, it's a safek. Now the question is, in a safek, who has to pay, right? So sometimes Shmuel says it depends on when in the month you show up and ask this and challenge it. Rav Nachman is saying the safek always goes, right? The assumption is that the money and the rent is owed to the owner of the property. And to not have to pay it, you'd have to prove that that month is not included in the rental agreement. I think we're going to stop here, even though it's not quite the end. It's a new sugya that will continue tomorrow. So I'm going to stop 8 lines to the bottom. I hope I'll tell Dov this, so he starts them here tomorrow. We will actually continue this discussion. It does not end for a bit till the next Mishnah about renters' rights, about who in fact gets to claim from the other person. So we'll stop there. Have a great week. I'll follow up with David about Shavuot, but one of us will be learning in person in the lobby. Have a good day.
Okay. You can't do it. Come on, you told me you can't do it. You can't do it? You need some help? You need some help? You said you said you need some help. You can't do it. You need some help. You help. I didn't hear that. I did, I mean, she was, when I saw her, she was sleeping. Give me, okay. I listen, I don't need a long discussion. I have to leave in 2 minutes, so just let me focus. No. No. Okay, all right, let me help you for a moment. No. Okay, that's all right. I'm gonna help you. Come on, buddy. You're gonna go to the restroom soon, okay? No. Yeah, you're gonna go to the restroom. Okay? Yeah. Just make up your mind. Don't stand in the way. Come this way. I'm gonna help you. Come on. Okay, okay, you said you couldn't do it. I'm gonna help you. Okay, I'm gonna help you. Yes, I gotta help you. Come this way, please. Come, that's all. Just come over this way. Move your legs like that. Take this away. I'm gonna help you out. I'm helping you. You got a little bit wet, okay? That's all. It's all right. It's okay. I'm gonna help you a little bit. Okay? That's all. Okay, do it again like this. Take this away. Take that little away. They're a little bit wet. See, the skin got a chance to heal last night. Yeah. Skin was healing a bit. Which better? Yeah. I said your skin is looking better, but I know you may not like sleeping on that side like that. But maybe not, but skin looks a little better. That looks better. Put this on for now. No. No? You don't want this one? You don't want to be naked? Put something on you, okay? No. Yes. Come on, put this, yeah, put it on like this. Put that on. Okay, put this on here. This is something dry, okay? Come this way now. Put this on now. Okay, put it on like this. Here. Okay. You come over, right? Come like this. Okay. That's it. Okay. Thank you. I want you right in the change. You want it to come up this way. Yeah. And I know you don't like that process, but you do feel better when you're dry. Were you buying something at your brochure there? What you buying there? What is that? No, it looks like it's something on there, something for sale. And they're selling. Oh. You know them? No. Well, who are they? What's the name on there? Relativamente. You want some breakfast soon?
Mother, hello, going back to sleep? You want some breakfast? Maybe? You want some breakfast? You want some breakfast? Yes? Hello? You want some breakfast? You want some food? Put that down. Put that down? Put it down? Put the hand down? Put it down? Put it down. Okay. I don't know. You want breakfast? If she wants breakfast, I don't know.
Oh my. You want a blanket? You want another blanket? Are you warm enough? What? Are you warm enough? Are you cold? What? Are you cold? Oh, so I'll put you on the blanket. Okay, you want a pillow under your head? What? You want a pillow? What? Okay. Are you comfortable? Are you comfortable now? Is this comfortable? Oh, yeah. Oh, okay, that's good. All right. Okay, I just wanna go wash, okay? Cause I didn't wash and. Wash, yeah, I wanna wash my body because I didn't wash. Because I have a bandage, and I didn't want the bandage. I went to the doctor and the doctor put a bandage on, they made a cut. And they put a bandage. So I kept it dry, but now I wanna go wash it. I kept it dry and clean. But now I have to wash it, it's already more than a week.